We've had such success from our radio show. I thought it would be a really good idea to convert our radio show also into a podcast. And I see it done with a lot of radio shows where they become a podcast. And that way people can listen to them any time of the day or night. And the distribution is also, it's very modern, but very good.
Yeah.
So in this podcast show, I am wanting to talk a lot about what's going on in the area, not just including real estate, but other really important things that influence the community. So I thought that would be very interesting. And, the population in Greater Springfield is approaching 40,000 people.
Quite amazing, isn't it?
It's grown so much over the last, 30-ish years and there's so much happening all of the time, whether it's community events or whether it is real estate or infrastructure changes, the hospital happening. There is so much topical information in this, what is known as growing city almost.
It's amazing when you drive along the highway, and every time I go along the highway, I go, oh my goodness, another hill has been scraped.
Yes.
And before you turn around, the infrastructure is starting to go in. And then before you turn around again, there are homes being built there.
Yeah, I know. What started out as a community of one house and then two houses has really exploded. They do say that this is the fastest growing corridor in all of Australia, and you really can see it. It's almost like you say they're clearing an area and then more houses, but all the little pockets are sort of all starting to join up now.
Yes. That also brings challenges, doesn't it?
Yes.
Like we look when developers go in, they build the roads and the channels and the gardens and the grass and this, that and the other. But between those little sub-developments, the roads are absolutely disgusting. So you go from like a double lane into a single lane, which is garbage, back to a nice double lane again. And you can understand people getting so frustrated.
Well, I've actually seen a lot of people want to move out of the area as a consequence. So they'll move to Greater Springfield, they're full of excitement, and then 2 years later they're saying, I can't stay here anymore because, I've got internet issues, or I've got, the road network is too congested and it takes me over an hour to get to work. So it's beneficial for me to move closer to my job than stay out here. So, I mean, whilst there's lots and lots of roadworks happening, and I suppose as frustrating as it is, it's also very good. There has been a lot of challenges with this growing community.
So, Tracey, I guess that brings into what we're going to discuss today, and that's the property market and the changes that have happened over recent times.
Yeah, so it's been several months since we've spoken, and I think last time we were speaking, the interest rates were still rising.
Very much so.
So we were seeing rise after rise after rise, and now we've actually seen, that stop, and I think we've had 3 consecutive months of the rates on hold. And what that has done has given buyers a lot of confidence that the market has stabilised.
Right.
I think if you remember back, I had suggested to you that I expected the market to rise at the end of the year.
Yeah.
If you remember that.
I do.
And I'm absolutely seeing that now.
Right.
So whilst I talk to a lot of people out there that say, the market's terrible, and these are people that aren't in the real estate market that are listening to the news, where the news is saying all this doom and gloom. But the reality on the ground is that every time a house is listed for sale, there's so many buyers that want to buy the house, and there's not enough homes for the number of buyers out there.
Right.
And so I am seeing the real estate market rise. So property values are increasing at the moment. I don't know the exact percentages. It would be a gradual increase, which is really good. And we want to see rises, but we don't want to see dramatic rises. I personally don't like a market that's increasing at a rapid rate of knots, because it becomes stressful for both buyers that are trying to get into the market. It's also stressful for owners because they've got to go off and buy somewhere else, and it's a very competitive market. It's
funny, Tracey, the analogy that you drew about people moving into Springfield and then having a couple of years here, then finding whether trying to challenges getting to work and the like. Our family's just gone through an exact scenario of that. Came to Springfield, bought, eventually bought in out in Ripley Valley.
Yes.
Just sold their house just last week in Springfield. and picked up quite a deal of extra money that that they
What,
didn't expect.
In a short period?
The week.
Yeah.
They didn't think the price that was put on it was realistic, but when somebody came in with an offer, bingo, gone.
Well, and that's what I see. I mean, people say to me, how long is it going to take to sell my house? And generally I say 3 weeks, which is to be a little bit conservative and give myself a little bit of breathing room. But in reality, it's normally within a week.
Yep.
And I do remember days in real estate where it would take me 4 months, 6 months to sell a house. But right now, it is still only taking, between 1 and 3 weeks. And the homes that don't sell, the ones that languish on the market and you see sitting there week in, week out, they're the properties that aren't presented well. Maybe they've got a tenant, maybe they have access issues, or maybe they're overpriced.
Right.
But homes that are priced well, within a 5% strike range, sell really well.
Oh gosh, you're spot on. It's beautiful sitting here talking to you and thinking, hang on, there's no BS in this. This is absolutely spot on.
No, it's really good to see. And I did say, I don't like a heavily rising market. And I don't as a real estate agent. It's nice to be able to, go into someone's lounger and provide them a price expectation and it be accurate. And these really high and aggressive price increases that I've seen over the years are actually quite challenging for real estate agents and also for buyers. So whilst we all as property owners have a lot of money sitting in properties and we want our properties to increase in value, this nice steady rise that I'm seeing at the moment is really good for all of us.
Tracey, we mentioned at the outset of our program about some of the challenges that we have in the area. We're all very, very much aware, and it's not just limited to this area, crime and the spate of crimes, particularly with young people.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about crime in the area because I see it a lot. And if you're on any of the Facebook groups, you will constantly see, my house got broken into or an attempted break-in.
Yep.
It's normally involving youth crime.
Yep.
And I see it all the time, but a really interesting example from just this last week was one of the ladies at the office I work at. She drove home from work. Her car was in the garage. She hadn't shut the garage door. I don't know how long she'd been home for, but it hadn't been very long, maybe 10 minutes, when all of a sudden this white SUV pulls up. 2 young women jumped out.
No.
And they ran up the driveway or walked up the driveway rather fast, straight into the garage. Now, they went into her car. They ended up stealing her remote control, a garage remote control.
My goodness.
And I think they got disrupted by the neighbours because the neighbours saw it, and next minute they ran out and whatnot, all caught on camera.
Right.
They even looked at the camera, and
crazy.
And you can imagine the distress and the trauma from this because this particular lady has a very young baby, and luckily they were disturbed and they didn't go into the house. They didn't steal anything other than this remote, but. Right. You can imagine the inconvenience.
Oh, well, if we go back to when we were talking the last time, it happened to Bridget and I. We've been through the same scenario. Nowadays, we're like Fort Knox. We've got the crim safe and we've got the cameras and the alarms and everything. But we didn't have before. And,
absolutely.
But the sad thing is the cameras that we had perfect shots of these young people, and they were young. And here we are now, 5 months later. The detectives have said we just can't track them down. And I just wonder, with databases that we have nowadays and facial recognition and the like, but, we've just got to grin and bear it, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I mean, it raises a really important issue in our community, which is that this seems to be happening daily. Sometimes in our rent roll, we will hear about, we'll get a call and there would be 3 properties in a certain street that have all been attempted to have break-ins on that day, whether it's normally stealing cars and whatnot. But, it makes me think about sometimes we drive into our garage with our little ones asleep in the car.
Yes.
Leave them asleep in the car, wind all the windows down, of course, and we can't do that. We can't be leaving anything really in the car because they're trying to steal our cars.
And if you think of the scenario, you just come home from the shops and you think, oh, Bubba will be right for
Absolutely.
a minute.
Absolutely.
And you don't realise that you're being cased. Someone's followed you home,
Yes.
like in this scenario. Yeah, and look, we all know that being a victim of crime is not a very, very nice thing. But let's just hope that with this new committee that's being formed with the government.
That's exactly right. This new committee's been formed, and it'll be really interesting to see what the Premier actually announces in relation to punishments around youth crime, because it's a really big issue, especially out here.
Tracey, one of the things that we mentioned at the outset was to talk about some of the challenges that we've got, and of course crime in the area is one of them. But when you have such growth that we're having at the moment, some of the infrastructure that needs to go in, and we're looking at the road situation, you just wonder how long it takes to put in a double-lane highway, and you would know much better than me because you've been living here for so long and seen those challenges.
The road networks at the moment are all being upgraded. Now, obviously this is a good thing for the community, but driving from one side of Greater Springfield to the other can turn into a 45-minute exercise in peak hour traffic, school zone times, etc. It's so frustrating for us all. And they recently just shut exit 32, which is the off-ramp of the Centenary Motorway into Greater Springfield. And they announced that they're shutting that for 6 months.
6 months. That's old. That's over Christmas as well. That's a long time.
It's crazy. Apparently they're taking it from a 2-lane exit to a 4-lane exit. Now, this is wonderful that when it's done, it'll be amazing. Just like we've seen the Centenary, that upgrade changed from, where it goes from 2 lanes to 1 lane, at the Logan Motorway. Now, that's just been changed, and that's awesome. However, you've got to wonder why these roads aren't built properly, knowing the population expectations and the growth plan. What I did want to mention was that the Department of Transport and Main Roads are undertaking a survey or a study. Now, I thought it would be interesting to note that the community can complete the survey. It's due by the 24th of September 23, and provide your own input into what you would like to see in the Greater Ipswich area. Now, I thought that was really good because, of course, we've got all of these changes happening in this area, but in my opinion, a little bit too late.
The other thing too is that this particular survey they're looking at doing covers everything from walking through to train travel and all sectors in between. So you can't turn around and say, nobody asked me. You've just got to put pen to paper and let them know.
Assuming they listen.
Well, well, you'd hope so. Tracey, you were mentioning that there's recent legislation in regard to minimum housing standards. So can you give us an idea about those?
On the 1st of September, so just a couple of weeks ago, the Residential Tenancies Authority came out with the minimum housing standards, and how this impacts, property management is really what I want to talk about. So there's a lot of rental properties in our area. There's a lot of tenants. Now, in reality, this new legislation probably isn't going to impact too many homes out here because they're quite new. But there is properties, in the surrounding suburbs that are, say, over 30 years of age that it would impact. And really what this means is that it's designed to protect people in relation to ensuring that their home that they're residing in as a tenant meets the minimum standards.
Right.
And then what to do if it doesn't. Now, importantly, some of the changes, include that the property has to be weatherproof and structurally sound, which is obviously critical if you're living in a property. It has to be in good repair, so the fixtures and fittings have to be, working and likely not to cause injury. So think of your electrical lights and things like that. It also has to be free of vermin, so your pests, etc., and mould. Right. And I do see mould. I was in a property the other day down in Goodna that had been flood affected, and what are we, 23, and we've still got mould in these properties, and they've been treated professionally, not just cleaned, but
Yes.
professionally sprayed and treated, and yet we've still got persistent mould. Well, it doesn't meet these new minimum housing standards whatsoever. All your locks and latches have to be functional on your external doors and also on your windows. Windows is an interesting thing because sometimes they don't always have locks.
Yes.
And you've got to have privacy. So things such as, in reasonable places. So your bedrooms, your bathrooms, they have to have curtains, blinds and things like that so that people can't see in. All of these things seem, reasonably basic, but honestly, you'd be really surprised how many properties just don't meet these minimum things. And I'll give you a really good example, which I see, which is one day this person pulled up into this driveway and they lived in the street, but they had pulled into the driveway to turn around and they'd actually driven into the garage door.
Right. Okay.
And smashed the garage door in and then driven off.
Right.
So the tenant that lived there, well, it wasn't her fault.
Of course.
Because she didn't do the damage.
No.
So the owner doesn't have insurance and doesn't want to pay for it and wants the person that crashed into the door to pay for it.
Right.
So the tenant knew the person that had done it because it was a neighbour. So the owner wants this particular person to pay for it and that particular person doesn't want to pay for it. And the only course of action is really to take them through QCAT courts and say, hey, on this day you did this and blah, blah, blah. So this doesn't happen because the owner lives interstate. Meanwhile, time goes on, months and months go on, and this garage door is still all smashed in. One, not usable, not making the home under these under these new minimum standards, non-compliant. And lo and behold, nothing is happening. So as strange as you could be thinking, why wouldn't you fix these things? This is a really good example of why sometimes homes are left like this.
Right.
Now, in this example, I obviously said to the owner, you don't meet you've got to fix this. It's a non-negotiable. And they did. So they did, but it took a lot of, there wasn't a lot of options in the end. It ended up being the owner's responsibility. But this is where I do see situations where properties are just left and they deteriorate over time and people don't look after them.
But Trace, you're a property manager as well, right?
Yes.
So, but I can imagine if somebody's had a home, let's say in the older suburbs for some time,
yes,
and it belonged to their mum, and they've got a tenant in there, they'd have no idea about some of these legislation changes and the like. I could imagine some of the difficulties trying to get them to put locks on windows and curtains and the like. Yeah,
there is a lot of, you think about your big properties where you've got lots of windows and things, and a lot of the time they don't have blinds or anything on them.
Yep.
And now
old Queenslanders and the like.
And now they've got to have some sort of privacy so that people can't actually see inside the property.
So Trace, is this where if I'm a tenant, you go through, is it ACAT?
No, you actually go to the RTA.
RTA,
yeah.
Right. Okay.
But obviously you notify your property manager first and say, look, I'm requesting that these items, be attended to.
But if it's done through a private person?
Absolutely. It's again the RTA.
Right,
so notification through to the RTA. They will advise tenants as to what to do and what their best course of action is.
Oh, great advice, Trace.
So, I thought we'd want to talk about that, and I will talk about it a little bit more in the coming weeks because there are lots and lots of other changes that are coming in and what course of action for people to take.
Trace, thank you for joining us once again, and we look forward to catching up same time next week.
Thank you.